Speaking about turning customers into fans, it's funny. When brand innovators ask you, hey, do you want to moderate a segment? Sometimes you'll see the name in the brand, you're like, if you need me, I'll do it. However, when I saw True Classic, I said, yes, absolutely, because obviously I'm a fan. If you think that I look good just because I might be, a decent looking individual, it's not that. It's because I'm wearing True Classic, right? Like, I'm a fan. I think it's great. I'm like addicted to the clothes, the long sleeve tees particularly. And what's even funnier is when I came here on Sunday, we did the Brand Innovators dinner, and I mentioned that I'm going to be doing this segment, and there were so many people that said the exact same thing, which is a really interesting reality of this particular conversation. So, if you're unfamiliar with True Classic, Ben, I would love for you to introduce this for the uninitiated and the storyline of your point of origin to where you guys are today.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the support here. It makes me actually really happy because quite literally the purpose of this brand is to empower everybody to look good and feel good, and that was the idea initially. And the company was founded back in 2019 after realizing there was a pretty big gap in the marketplace where you either had like a t-shirt that's like really high-end, it costs a lot of money, or really crappy ones that were maybe cheap, like I don't actually name any brands, but we didn't really like meet the needs, right? So we thought, hey, how can we create the best t-shirt in the world? One that people love wearing every day, fits them really well, feels really great from a fabric perspective, and ultimately is affordable and accessible to the masses. And I don't think anybody really thought that this would look the way it did. The company absolutely exploded in 2 short years after bootstrapping it. We crossed 9 figures profitably, which is really hard to do, especially going into kind of like a commodity space. No real X factors, right? There's no celebrity here. There is no a lot of VC money to burn. There is no, oh my God, you guys created this incredible product nobody that did before. We freaking sold t-shirts. Just pure like consumer obsession and good execution, which I know I'm gonna dive deeper into. But nothing makes us happier than hearing from customers that they love wearing our stuff every day. And we started with the t-shirts, and I'm actually modeling everything. This is our jeans, this is our waffle, and you don't see it, but I also wear our underwear and socks. Underwear is our unsung hero. Everybody knows this for the t-shirts. Go for the underwear.
It's awesome.
You will never go back.
Because they get you at checkout.
They do, yes.
Why not?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the short storyline is we started t-shirt in the US, online on the website, and we've expanded across products, markets, and channels. So products, as I mentioned, we moved from just a t-shirt brand to a bunch of different categories. We're also working on female snacks. Markets, we moved from being the US to shipping worldwide. We're in 190 markets worldwide. And channels, we moved from being a website to being more omni-channel, which I've heard a lot of people talking about. So the different digital storefronts, so Facebook, Instagram shops, TikTok shop, the Shopify shop app. We have our own 8 retail locations. The 9th is actually just the 9th list. We are in conversations with wholesalers and building physical distribution, marketplaces like Amazon and Walmart, and so on.
So, during our pre-conversation, one of the things I found most interesting was the fact that, and how you outlined it was, look, man, we're an essentials brand, right? There's nothing X factor to your point, celebrity endorsement or what have you that's driving this. And it leads me to a few different data points that I've known about this in this industry for a long time, and I'm gonna say them out loud, and then I'll get to my question. The average consumer today is exposed to 30 to 40,000 different forms of advertising on a daily basis. That's not just ads, right? That could be the logo on your coffee cup. That could be whatever you're seeing as you're walking through the lane. 30 to 40,000 different forms of advertising on a daily basis. The modern consumer, in order for them to be able to go about the world without being just inundated with all of this stimulus, is they develop a defense mechanism. It's called ad blindness or logo blindness. And so what that states is essentially 80 to 90% of everything that a consumer sees doesn't ever graduate from their lizard brain to their neocortex, right? It's just something that goes right past. Much in the same way, when you're driving to the grocery store, it's the same kind of root cognitive concept. You're driving to the grocery store, you never really paid attention to how many red lights you hit, how many lefts or rights you took. You just know that you got there. Your brain kind of goes into autopilot. So, how does a brand in this day and age of so many competing direct-to-consumer logos as I'm scrolling Instagram, right? I see all these amazing brands. How did True Classic break through the clutter?
It's a great question, and I've heard a little bit about, kind of like earlier in the conversation, people view, oh, we have a different customer, they're shopping here, they're shopping there. People think that they know their customer because they know who they are demographically. Well, my customer, who is it? Oh yeah, those are men, they're 25 to 54, they make this much money. What we're all missing in this conversation is the human aspect, right? Those are real people, not customers, not users, not consumers, people. And those people have problems. And you need to understand those problems. And you need to understand how they feel about those problems. And you need to understand how they want to feel and how you propose a solution that makes them feel the way they do want to feel. And it all is rooted in this idea of like, are you taking this like psychology approach to how you advertise to the consumers? So a lot of people start with the product and then they portray it in the world, right? Here's my product, here's what it does. Features, 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 right? They don't sell the emotional benefit. They don't illustrate to someone the problem that they're facing and why you might be the solution to that problem. So for us, to put simply, we don't sell clothes. We sell confidence. We sell self-esteem. We sell a look good, feel good feeling. That resonates. And that stops people in their scroll. If you think about social media, that might stop someone in their walk. And you really need to illustrate that, right? So one of the things we do creatively is that we always show the difference. So we say, like, experience the true classic difference. Instead of just saying, here's our t-shirt, it's like we just create that contrast of like, here's what a typical t-shirt looks like. It's baggy, it's scratchy, it's not particularly flattering. Here's what a well-fitted t-shirt from True Classic look like. Like one visual would be better than like 60,000 words, right? In getting the point across. And you have to be really creative in that regard. So it starts with a consumer obsession and empathy, of really understanding them on a deep psychological, emotional level. And it continues with like storytelling and really illustrating those benefits and really making it in such an easy to digest way where people just know it. Like you mentioned like earlier about the ads. When I ask people about kind of like what they think about it, it's like, oh, you're doing the dead bot ads, right? Because we really just coined that idea of like, we're really like tied around the arms and kind of like chest and shoulders and loose around the torso. We're gonna make you look better. Hard your guts a little bit, and people just start thinking, oh, that solves that problem. So those are some ideas there, but creativity, you can't overdo it. It's the secret to a lot of marketing ultimately.
So speak to your creative process. How are you iterating? How are you really honing in and zeroing in on the creative messaging that really, truly resonates with your target customer?
Yeah, so to go back to, first of all, you have to have a consumer insights engine. You can't stop at just like who they are demographically, because that's the only data you have access to, right? So you want to read reviews, and you want to read negative reviews of not just your brand, but other people's brands, and what are people complaining about, right? You want to read commentary on social media. You want to do your own post-purchase survey. You want to do anything you can to really, you want to talk to people and ask them like, hey, what is it you like about our underwear, and how is it different than someone else's underwear? And you want to start thinking about like, who are those people? Are they problem aware? Do they even know what problem they're facing? Are they solution aware, right? And do they know about us specifically as a brand? And then you go and say, okay, so now I have an insight in mind, right? So I believe that the problem is that majority of shirts do not fit guys really well. They are just boxy, or they're just like standardized, and they're not really meant to accentuate the nice parts of the man's body to make them look good, feel good. So that's great. Now, how many people are kind of aware of that being a problem versus guys just, continuing in their life? Like you'd see like a lot of, in our world, like we started thinking like, hey, it's guys buying for themselves, and we realized that we actually need to really speak to females, because nobody cares about the man in their world to look good and feel good more than that female in the household, right? And she wants it for her husband more than anybody, and she wants it for her dad, and she wants it for her son, and so on. So it's like, okay, now who is she and what does she care about, right? So she might be, maybe she's not in many cases even the purchase maker, right? She might just be that influencer in the back. And you start thinking about her, and you start going kind of down that rabbit hole, and then you start thinking about how do I illustrate it the most clearly. So even if you think about the ad, there's different sections to the ad, right? So the first part is that you gotta hook someone in before they even go to the next thing, right? People scroll. When I used to work at Facebook, we had a similar stat, which is people scroll on, at least that was the case years ago, through like 300 feet of content in their feed every day, which is the equivalent of the Statue of Liberty, right? And you just think about it, like you just an unbelievable like scrolling amount, and you need to be that thing that stops them in their scroll. That is a hard thing to do. And who else is there, right? Their family, their friends, their favorite influencers, funny things, you name it, really clickbaity stuff. So that hook is really, you can't obsess over that enough, and you need to figure out like what you're doing in that first 3 seconds of the ad to get someone's attention. And then what do you do from there? How do you bring them into the problem? And you start thinking about kind of like the main part. And how do you close that? How do you have a really clear call to action? How do you create a sense of urgency or scarcity or social proof or you name it to really bring them back? But it all is rooted in consumer psychology, in storytelling, and it starts with the insight and continues with like a lot of like marketing best practices and a lot of test and learn. And like that's one part I would live with. It's like you don't land on a winning creative just because you had a great idea. You evolve and you iterate and you iterate and you iterate and it doesn't end. I think we're at a place where we're generating hundreds of iterations a week on the content that we are running, and we spend a lot of money advertising.
So, with the concept of growth marketing, right, there's a two-sided coin. On one side you have the art, on one side you have the science. We've been speaking a lot about art, speaking to the customer, making sure that the creative iteration is there, making sure that we're testing things from a creative perspective. But then from the science side of the fence, one of the things that you talked about during our pre-interview was profitable growth rather than growth at all costs. And how I interpreted that was a lot of the DTC brands in the space are, whether they're venture backed or not, are throwing money towards getting customers into their funnel, whereas you guys took a much more deliberate scientific approach to ensuring that you're quantifying the investment that you're making that is actually driving growth, rather than crossing your fingers and taking a leap of faith. Would you mind speaking to a little bit about your approach and the methodological rigor that you all apply to ensuring that you're spending your money in the right places?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, how many of you are brand operators or owners or marketers, brand side or tech side? Yeah. Okay, so the biggest policy to start is that people measure the wrong things, or they don't calculate metrics correctly, or they don't even give it enough thought to really understand, right? And we have a lot of like language in the industry that's really misleading, right? So as an example, AOV. Everybody thinks AOV. When you think about it, what is the value of your average order? It's definitely not gross revenue. Just the wrong way to think about it, right? Because there's a lot of things out of that order. There's taxes, there's units, there's returns, there's CX, there is shipping, there is fulfillment, there is payment processing fees. There's lots of things. The value of the order is not what you show on Shopify, despite them calling it that way, right? So you really have to take that numerical approach of just understanding like how is value being created for the brand? What is the value of the customer? A lot of LTV, right? Lifetime value. What is the value of the customer? Well, it's the cumulative gross revenue of the customer. That's also wrong. Like, what is the value? The value is the accumulation of gross profit, and then you want to deduct from that the ad spend to get to the accumulation of contribution profit. Now, that is real value being created for the brand. So you start with just like pure math, very simplistic terms, but doing the right calculus to make sure that everybody is speaking the same language. Now you start thinking about here, what are the goals, right? So the first goal is to get people in the brand, so you got to acquire those customers. And the second goal is to really maximize that contribution profit per customer over their lifetime, or what we call customer lifetime value. And then you start thinking about like what is driving that. And that is a hard thing to do because you will get 5 different answers from that 5 different sources. So you might look on what GA shows, Google Analytics, you might look at what on-platform would show. You might never do anything beyond that, but I would highly recommend you do a post-purchase survey to ask people how did they first hear about you, what drove them to the store today, when did they first hear about you. That's a very good question to ask. It's really enlightening to kind of like understand like how long the journey actually takes. You might want to run incrementality studies, like conversion lift studies. You might want to run your own regressions, right, to see kind of how things are going. But the point about all of that is there is like probably 3 to 5 different main tools you want to use, and you want to triangulate all of that to start building conviction of like what is working, how well it's working. The answer is typically not surface level. Because if you did take the surface level, you might say like, look, branded search gets the highest return on ad spend, I've always been told it's about return on ad spend. And I don't know how much money I actually make from those orders, because maybe I sell 3 jeans in a pack and people actually return 2 out of the 3 because they wanted to check it for the size, or I just never did the math beyond that point. And I never thought about, well, those are lowest, kind of like lowest of the funnel audiences, that somewhere else in the mix I actually create that demand. So you're going to end up making just terrible investment decisions, right? And it's just going to lead you down the wrong path. So if I'm kind of summarizing that, it's first really understanding and defining what value looks like for the brand. We believe in the North Star being generating that marginal incremental contribution profit. That is the North Star. It's not gross revenue. It's not what's the CPA. It's not what Google shows on ROAS. It's none of those things. That's not real value. And then continuing to like putting as much rigor as possible into like solving, like, well, at the end of the day, the decision we make every day is how much to spend, where to spend it, right? At which channels, which tactics, and using any tool you can to come at it from different angles. And the more tools you have pointing in a direction of like, that is working better than that, let's shift towards that. You shift towards that and you start saying, well, are things actually getting better? Am I getting better customer lifetime value? Am I getting more customers in the door? Am I turning better P&L days from a revenue and profit standpoint? And if so, I'm moving in the right direction. If not, I course correct. And it's a very iterative process. There is no like silver bullet on how to do, marketing analytics well, despite all of us wanting simple answers. It's a very complex problem.
I think that one thing that was really illuminating is I grew up, I'm a salesperson, and so one thing that we've always been told is you have to measure what you treasure, right? And obviously, if you're measuring sales and impact on sales, that's going to over-index to lower funnel tactics, branding search, and what have you. And you all constantly, in some organizations, I would imagine that you probably have to fight that bias and say, well, actually, making sure that we're upstream of the lower funnel things that are the path of least resistance to getting the sale. Those things are more challenging for us to measure, but they're just as important, if not more important, because they're ultimately what sends that consumer on the journey towards that point of ultimate purchase. One thing that you talked about, and I'd love for you to share here, is there are aspects that are inherently immeasurable in a statistical type of sense. How do you guys approach the balance between the things that you can measure and the things that you necessarily can't? For example, customer feedback, where they're giving you some type of feedback. They saw your ad 2 years ago and then they ultimately looked to purchase. How is that factoring into your decision-making framework?
It's a great question because it's a challenge, and actually it's where the art gets in the science. If I were to kind of define that, because like we all want like a scorecard that's super clear. It tells you turn right, turn left, bump it up, push, pull back, whatever it is. But there is honestly just a lot of gut in this the kind of decision framework. And I'm a very much like left brain, analytics forward kind of guy. So I want the numbers, I want the stats, I want the rigor. And I'll give you like an example. Like we have those ads that I think we are most well known for. And those are like funny ads. The guys are called Greg too. They just do a lot of funny content for us, and it's like viral like on YouTube and on TikTok and on Instagram and whatnot. And when I just talk to people in real life, anecdotally, and I'm trying to say like, hey, how did you first hear about us? And like, oh, I saw your ad, which ad? And they always go back to describing that. I've yet to see the person who told me, I saw a static 50% off ad, and that's why I'm True Classic. Or I saw that, user-generated content of X, Y, and Z person, and that's why I came in. Like, it's always those like memorable pieces of content that are really generating this like ad recall. And when you see them sometimes in ROAS on platforms, it might not look as favorable as maybe a static ad, right? If you think about what you do in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, right? A lot of the content becomes like just super promo forward, static, like that's kind of the SOP, right? But if you are just looking at the data, you're missing the big picture of like this content actually works. And it creates all this like fun activity. And it's probably being undervalued compared to maybe that other stuff that might look really performant. And then it goes back to, okay, so what do you do about that? And we're trying to really find other ways to kind of like figure that out. So we'll ask them in the post-purchase survey, we'll ask people by just like talking to people and try to gauge like what is it that they're seeing. We would look at like upper funnel pieces like just like hook rate and video completion rate and engagement rates, which we don't really beat on or use, but it's like it's indication of like what gets people interested. And then in some cases we'll throw them into a mix of like let's just say an ad set on Meta, and then Meta define how much would go to this kind of comedian content versus the lowest funnel. It's all gonna optimize towards conversion, but like it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting and doesn't necessarily get the credit, right? It's quite literally the upper funnel piece, and then there is like the closer piece. What we don't do as a brand, at least as of yet, is create very specific funnel parts and very specific kind of campaigns for each. We're still like trying to generate direct response, and we believe in performant kind of branding versus like let's just brand for the sake of branding, because we want to brand and want to create that kind of great experience, but we don't. Yeah, it has to tie to results, right? And so, and it's not either or, which I think is a big fallacy in the industry. It's always like, are you a brand marketer or are you a performance marketer? You're a marketer, and you need to think about brand implications and you need to think about performance implications. Doing just branding without performing, not good. Not going to get a bootstrap brand to sustain, right? There's no, you mentioned the VC part, there's just no other option. I mean, what do you do if you're bootstrapping a brand other than turning it profitable or closing your doors? It's like there's no any other option other than to perform, to sustain. And that's the rigor that wasn't forced on a lot of people, in my opinion, maybe unfortunately kind of disservice by the industry, with a lot of VC money and just like money flowing in and just like expectations around growth at all costs. Like we're all like in nature of like what that money wanted you to do, right? People just wanted the revenue. And that's where how decisions were being made. They were not asked to turn around profitable, sustainable businesses from the get-go. They were like, well, we'll do that later, which it's interesting because it's a model that comes from more like tech-forward companies, right? Like, you need, like where are VCs originally from, right? Like it's like, hey, let's create this like, big tech company. It's going to take a minute until we monetize. We'll need to fund the first few years of operation. We'll turn a profit later on. With direct-to-consumer, I don't think that's the right model. It's like if you can't like create a product and sell it for and make ends meet, like you don't have a real business.
The moment that a customer capitulates from someone that just buys something to becoming a fan, there must be some signals that are telling signs of this. One, an obvious one would be the person that purchased one-time purchases again. For the ears in the room, what are some of those signals that you think other marketers should be looking at, and how you guys internalize it within True Classic, and how you make sure that someone not just becomes a fan, but stays a fan over a long enough time duration in perpetuity?
Yeah, so the first thing we try to strive for is to be this like people-forward company. Our customers are everything for us, and we really mean it. We don't just say it. And so we view anything that's customer-facing as of the absolute most kind of highest level of importance, right? So I'll give you an example. Customer experience. Majority of brands view that as a cost line item on their P&L. How do I minimize the cost per ticket? How do I minimize whatever, returns or exchanges or the cost of this or the cost of that? We take quite the opposite approach. How do we make these customers the happiest they've ever been? How do we over-deliver? How do we over-give? How do we blow their minds with like what they just experienced? And how can we actually do that? So I'll give you an example, like when if we talked about the females earlier, let's just say she bought it for her husband and he wasn't happy with the size, and we learned that she's pregnant. Not only are we going to give him the right size, but we're also going to send her like a maternity package just because it's not economically viable. But that is an amazing customer experience that she's going to remember for life. She's going to become a fan. She's going to tell about that to all the other females in her life to say like, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. I came to customer service already expecting to have a frustrating experience because I already like, oh shit, like they told me I needed to be a medium, but he's a large. And she's already upset. And they just like were so nice, so accommodating, solved my problem, and then surprisingly not doing something irrelevant. Because, I mean, not irrelevant, very relevant to me, but like not even what I asked for because they were like human. This is like an example of in a customer service like aspect. But on the product, the same thing. We like obsess about really delivering product people love, right? As an example, most brands in apparel in particular have logos or you know their logos on their apparel. You won't find a true classic logo on anything we do, visibly. And the reason is when we ask customers, do you want logos on your clothes? The answer is, we absolutely do not. So a brand that's like commercially forward, it's like, I want to have my brand visible for everybody and make every human in this world a walking advertisement of my brand. That's one approach. We put it everywhere. A brand that's like people forward say like, if my customer doesn't want the logo, then guess what? We're not putting the logo on. And that's fine. Because that's what they want. And we're in the service of them. And then they rave about, I actually like these guys, or like, I like this brand, because they actually listen and actually try to, on the pricing point, people don't want to feel like they're being gouged and like priced up the gazoo, right? We're trying to really create value for people. And it's hard to do with singles, so we have this whole bundle strategy. So we give you more, and we're able to just pass more value to the customer. And we're comfortable with customers feeling a great sense of consumer surplus. People sometimes are shocked that they can get 6 t-shirts for less than $100, and those are good freaking t-shirts. Like those are shirts that maybe you'll end up buying 60, 70 bucks elsewhere. How is that possible? Because we can, and it doesn't cost us that much more where we need to charge you 2, 3x just because we can. We want to serve you. That's what we're here to do. And so it's this like real consumer obsession and thoughtfulness in every step. And what comes on the other side of it is customers who actually feel happy. Because those are humans that feel heard, that feel listened to, that feel that people are delivering what they need, and they enjoy supporting the brand. And it's like, you mentioned like the poker chips, right? Like this is not a marketing thing. I'm not here to like throw, hey, it's not like a lead generation. It's like, and you know who we give it to most often, and I love doing it? Like the people who don't expect it. The Uber driver, the cashier, the person just opened the door. Why? Just give. Why not? I don't care what you do with it. Go get something for yourself, right? And it's like, and that's a lot of like Ryan, who's the founder. That's his mindset, and this like giving first creates this like sense of reciprocity, of like, I love this brand because they unconditionally gave for me, whether it was a customer experience perspective or just gave me store credit for just no reason, and it's how you turn humans into fans of the brand, because you're not like you're putting them first, and you're really being super empathetic and thoughtful about how to create a great experience for them.
That's just so interesting to me, because as you're talking about this, I think about the experiences that I've had as a consumer in the past, and whether I'm buying something or some type of commercial exchange, or I'm just engaging with another human being, someone that lets me cut in line because I'm late to the plane, or someone that like writes me a handwritten note, thank you. It's like those very little things that doesn't take that much effort, but will fundamentally transform the way that person considers an individual as well as they consider a brand. That's super interesting.
100%. We have like in the customer support team, like anybody who ever left any negative review, they chase these people and they try to make right by them, like nobody else. And it doesn't matter even if you never change it, but like it really hurts us. It's like gut wrenching to us. If someone had a bad experience with the brand, we are going to make them feel like we're making this right. And it doesn't matter what it costs. It doesn't matter if they never came back. It's not like a transactional thing. We want to do right by people. And people do take notice, I would say. And it's funny because we are really like an affordable apparel brand, but some people was like, you guys have better service than like Ritz-Carlton. And I didn't expect it, because I only bought 6 shirts for $9 or something. Like, why do you service me like that? Because we love this. So yeah, I think it's investing in your customers is always ROI positive, even when your CFO might think otherwise.
So if you were hired as a consultant to a brand, and you have all of this belief that you developed over time because it's the data supports your philosophies and the way that you guys approach business, what would be like the 3 essential principles that you would coach other brands on to ensure that they succeed out in the what I would define the red ocean of tons of competing brands capitalizing on another?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say it's around true problem solving. People want to buy things that they perceive to solve their problems. They don't care about you as a brand. They don't care how much money you make. They don't care about whether you're hitting your goals or not. They are humans and they have problems, and if you solve their problem, you're welcome into their lives, and if you're not, you're filtered amongst the other 40,000 pieces of content you see every day. So really obsessing over that problem and what is it, and how do you articulate it, and how do you actually solve that is the core of it. Don't just go, hey, I want to do apparel because True Classic seems to have it good, or I want to do web or whatever market. Like go, I know this customer has this type of problem, and I'm going to go and actually obsess over how to solve it. That is value creation that's being rewarded. That's the first part. The second component is I would probably put it on the marketing side. I think that if I'm thinking about the different disciplines of like business, being, let's just say, marketing, product, finance, and ops. Like if the first one was about the consumer problem and you created a product that really delivered on that problem, that's the foundation. That's hard to do, but possible. Marketing is the hardest, in my opinion. And you can't almost be thoughtful enough about it. And I think we all can agree that there's so many good products out there that just don't take off, right? So it's like the good product is absolutely necessary, but it's not sufficient. However, if you have great marketing and your product is shit, that's not going to sustain either, because once people are going to hold it, they're going to return it, they're going to bash you online, you're not going to succeed. So the product is the foundation, but the marketing is the real deal in terms of like, how do I take it places? So then I go back to rigor around like how you spend your money, and do you really focus on that profitability versus like, revenue? Do you focus on attributed versus incremental? Do you do all those things, right? And then the creativity within that. Like how are you being super thoughtful about telling that story? Stories sell. Good stories will take you so far. People love good stories. And when you bring that product of yours from like features to like an emotional benefit wrapped in a good story, everybody's gonna react to it. People are gonna talk about it. And then maybe the third is like I would really strive to like not overcommit and bootstrap your brand. I think it puts the discipline. It's a forcing mechanism for you not to kind of like return a bunch of bad money, throwing it into like a mediocre idea or a brand, and it forces you to operate with the rigor that's required. And there's still methods to raise you can raise debt. To finance like inventory and whatnot. You can drop ship before you develop. There's all sorts of like scrappy ways to do it. But I would highly recommend bootstrapping and not like starting with financing.
Amazing. So one more question. We'll open it up to audience for questions following this one. What's the next 24 months for True Classic? Where's the innovation? Where are you guys going to be focusing? Where do you see this business in the next couple of years?
So I think like in terms of opportunity, I believe that we have an incredible opportunity to establish ourselves as like a household name and become, this like multi-billion-dollar like apparel brand, or maybe even lifestyle brand. It's like rather than just apparel, like look good, feel good down the line. We are only 4-ish years old, so there's a long road ahead. I would say the focus is to continue on that expansion on those 3 areas of products, markets, and channel. Give a little more color around that. So on product, we started with the t-shirt and we went into all those other categories, but we are definitely not done when we think about making people look good and feel good. And it's for men, it's like, how do we make the best wallet? How do we make the best watch? How do we make the best blazer, right? Like there's all sorts of different things that our guys want from us, and we're just starting to scratch the surface. And then how do we serve her? Because she already counts, and she has nothing currently to shop for. And I actually, for the ladies in the crowd, do you have a favorite t-shirt brand? Go to. I don't think I've heard from a single lady today that she has that go-to t-shirt brand. And I just think it's such an amazing opportunity for us to try and make that, because they would love it. And there's also the different problems, and so that's something we're obsessing over right now. Like, how do we really deliver for her?
Stretch neck.
Okay.
Like it off the shoulder.
Here we
just
go.
like a t-shirt.
So we have different, so we're prototyping it, but we're really talking to other females, really trying to figure out like how do we solve for the same stuff, and starting with the same idea, like the t-shirt, right? And kind of going down that route. International is massive. I think the US is big, but once you find success in the US, there's just so much opportunity internationally. In TAM, speaking for apparel, like it's about 80% of the world TAM that's outside of the US. So we think about it like 4-1. So there's so much to do for us internationally. And it's not just the big countries, like big English countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK, but it's Germany, it's Mexico, it's Israel. There's a bunch of like long tail countries who want our stuff, and we just can't almost like serve them fast enough. So how do we accelerate that? With partners, with localized content, with localized fulfillment, so we can get that to them faster, cheaper, just improve our offering. And then on the sales channel front, we are basically all our revenue is online. We have I mentioned 8 stores, but those are like a rounding error on the big P&L. But physical is such a big opportunity for us because over 65-70% of apparel is being purchased offline. And actually, we just had this conversation earlier. There are so many of those customers out there who are just a sensory shopper. And I can tell them all day, every day, the best stories about, wow, our t-shirt is the best, and it's going to fit them really well and feel really great. And they're like, I get you, dude, but I got to try it. And if I am not going to try it, I'm not going to buy it. And so how do we get into those consumers in front of them? With retailers, I don't think we'll be able to do it fast enough with our own brick and mortar. But we're talking to all the large retailers on figuring out the right partnerships for us to really just be in front of our customers wherever they may shop. And the majority of them still shop offline.
Amazing. Questions from the audience for Ben?
When you think about other retailers, which is where I was going to go, so nice lead up. I appreciate you asking the question for me. How do you worry, or what do you think about when it comes to control of your own brand? It's obviously in your own online experience, in-store experience, you control all that entirely. If you're in a Target, Walmart, whatever, it doesn't matter what store it is, right? You kind of lose some of that identity. How do you think about it?
Yeah, we've had similar concerns with Amazon too before we launched. As in like, hey, you have identity issues, you have competition that you don't have direct to consumer, you have, I think pricing is a big one that not enough people talk about. How do you do pricing really well? Obviously the cost structure is different. If you're trying to do Walmart and they push you to do everyday low price and they can promise you the world in terms of volume, like is it cannibalizing what people do elsewhere, and like how much can you afford? I can't tell you that we've figured it out. What I would say is we're trying to create as consistent of an experience as possible and really allow people to shop us wherever they might be. I think that we always think from the business perspective, right? And we always, or the marketer perspective of is it omnichannel, is it offline, is it online, is it Amazon, is it, when you are a customer, you just want the product, you want it fast, you want it easy, you want to feel it, you want to try it. I don't think that the consumer in the world is putting it all together the way we do from the business side of things. So I just want to make sure that it's not a terrible experience, like Walmart specifically, where the conversations with them and they're trying to really elevate their apparel play, and they're really trying to establish themselves more as an apparel destination. And so there is opportunities with some of them to still have a better brand experience. That you want to end up on a shelf somewhere in an aisle that you're maybe not particularly proud to be on, or create a little bit of a store within a store, right? We're trying to really bring our media to the forefront because we think our media is really funny and engaging. So we're how can we show that in a retail location with a screen? But I would say pricing is actually one of those issues that I don't think we quite figured out yet. And how do you keep that consistent, especially with direct-to-consumer, you have more control over, you can change it or promote or change the pack structure. Once you go with the big retailers, everything becomes a lot more set in stone, and just you're losing a lot of flexibility. So that's one of the concerns. And I would say last thing is we're thinking through, is it the same assortment, or do we develop unique assortment to a particular retailer to meet that customer need and create a creative opportunity versus cannibalize what we currently have? And that can be from the product standpoint as well as from the price and the overall offer.
All right. There was no way I was going to stop this session. You are fantastic. Both of you, really, really great session. Ben, dude, you're my marketing hero right now. The fact that you were able to combine the financials with the marketing side of the house, talking about contributory profit, I mean, you're speaking our language. This is exactly what we need to do, especially when you got people in the market grading their own homework. So really, really impressive stuff. I think for me, what makes most sense as a customer is the way that you guys do it is common sense. It's easy. It's no frills. And as a guy, that's all I want is no frills. So thank you. Really, really great stuff. I really appreciate it.